Thank you very much. Now, I mentioned earlier that our next panel is quite an exciting panel, and they're going to be touching on the topic of entrepreneurship. And just by a show of hands, I'd like to see, do we have any entrepreneurs in the room? By a show of hands? Are you guys looking forward to hearing from these gentlemen and ladies? Are you? I need to make sure you guys are ready. Now, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I need your help in welcoming these fine gentlemen out here. Is that okay? Yeah. We're going to start with our first panelist. Mr. Eric Zeballos is Deputy Director of ILO Washington office. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Zeballos. All the way down. Our next panelist, Kolade Adeyemo, is the co-founder and chief marketer office of OXOSI. Ladies and gentlemen, Kolade Adeyemo. Following Mr. Adeyemo, we have Sabine Malik, who is a senior policy advisor at the U.S. Department of State. Ladies and gentlemen, Sabine Malik. Our next panelist is Mr. William Conrad Aseko Alogo. He is one of the Yali Fellows. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. William Conrad Aseko Alogo. The following panelists, I'd like to ask you to please stand as we announce His Excellency Mamadou Gaussou Diarra, who is the Minister of Citizens Reconstruction or Development from Mali. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome His Excellency Mamadou Gaussou Diarra. Next, we have Ms. Annabelle Gonzalez, who is a Senior Director for Trade and Competitiveness at the World Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Annabelle Gonzalez. And finally, your moderator, please help me welcome Mr. Dion Filmer, who is the lead economist for the World Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with a huge round of applause, your moderator, Mr. Dion Filmer.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to be here today. I think, given the time, I'm just going to go right into it and introduce our opening speaker, Ms. Annabelle Gonzalez, who's the Senior Director of the Global Practice on Trade and Competitiveness here at the World Bank. She's the former Minister of Trade and Investment for Costa Rica. And in addition, she's been a lecturer in over 30 countries and published extensively on trade and investment issues. Unfortunately, she won't be able to stay with us after her opening remarks. She has another engagement that she couldn't get out of. But we thank her for her setting us off in our session today.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Let me start by thanking the leaders of the World Bank, IMF Young African Society, Elikia and Yvonne, for organizing this African Youth Forum and inviting me to speak. I'm especially pleased to introduce this panel on youth entrepreneurship and employment, pivotal issues facing the African region, and two of the central issues that my group is dealing with in the newly established World Bank Group Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice. Helping our clients succeed in the areas of trade and competitiveness will be central to achieving the twin goals of the World Bank Group, eliminating extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity. We see economic growth and job creation as critical development objectives of our global practice as we work to strengthen competitiveness, increase trade, promote investment, foster innovation, and promote entrepreneurship in partnership with policymakers and the private sector in Africa and worldwide. I just joined the bank, the World Bank Group, on July 1, and I'm very excited by this incredible opportunity to deliver the very best with access to all of the resources of our global practices and the various parts of the Bank Group. The panel that we're about to hear will deal with one of the greatest global challenges of them all, the urgent need to promote job creation. As documented in the Banks Group World Development Report of 2013, the imperative of spurring job creation is enormous. In the next 15 years, the global economy must create 600 million new jobs just to keep up with the world's pace of population growth, much less to begin to reduce today's painfully high unemployment rate. As pointed out in a similar report, the Job Study of 2013 by IFC, 90% of those new jobs must be created by the private sector. Now, the place where the task is most urgent, where the need is most intense, is Africa. Africa faces an enormous challenge, and yet it also offers a great opportunity. Africa is facing an immense demographic transition. More than half of today's African population is below the age of 25, in the midst of or soon to enter their prime working years. The private sector must create millions of productive, good-paying jobs, both in the urban and rural areas, to keep pace. The challenge for Africa and other regions with struggling economies is that chronic unemployment and intensifying poverty can be the source of social and political instability. As a World Bank Group study found in 2009, half of the young people who joined a rebel movement or an armed insurgency point to unemployment as their main reason for doing so. But there's a huge opportunity for Africa as well. If the demographic dividend can be harnessed to increase productivity, the rising young generation can enjoy higher incomes and improved living standards. If young Africans can be effectively integrated into the labor market, their energy and productivity will increase economic growth. The great task then is to find ways to increase job opportunities in the private sector so Africa can make the most of the demographic dividend and to consider the various constraints they face in Africa. From our research, in the region, firms in the formal sector generally stay small. They tend not to grow, and they tend not to create enough jobs. African firms in the formal sector, no matter how long they have been in business, tend to be 20 to 24% smaller than firms in other regions of the world. Africa also has issues in terms of productivity, in terms of labor productivity. Among the various regions of the world, Sub-Saharan Africa has the lowest GDP per worker relative to the figure for high-income countries. Now, the weakness of formal firms is due to both external and internal factors. There are market-related factors, and there's a relatively small internal market. For example, the smallest countries like Lesotho suffer because of their small domestic markets and will rely on trade to grow healthily. Regionally, integration is a great opportunity and can be significantly improved. African countries are losing out on billions of dollars in potential trade earnings every year because of high trade barriers with neighboring countries. In many ways, it is easier for Africa to trade with the rest of the world than with itself. There's also great opportunity to increase international trade. According to the WTO, in 2012, Africa contributed to 3.5% of the total value of global exports in merchandise and services, which is still a small number. There is also tremendous potential to be gained in terms of investment. Although internationally, Africa has some of the lowest inflows of foreign direct investment, domestically, intra-African investment has been rising more than 30% a year since 2007. Coming from a low baseline, it proves that great potential for more work to be done in this area. Although across the region, the average ease of doing business is relatively weak, countries across Africa are working hard to improve their business environment. And we have great examples, for instance, in Mauritius and South Africa, who are among the top 40 in the global ranking of the Doing Business report. In the formal sector, the World Bank Group is helping our client countries with both technical and financial assistance to expand market opportunities and integrate the African economy into global value chains. we are working on two dimensions, the regional integration dimension and in improving sectors' competitiveness to diversify exports. To offer one prominent example, in order to promote regional integration, we're working in the Great Lakes region. Through the Great Lakes Trade Facilitation Initiative, which focuses on the region's critical border communities to provide a safer and more transparent trade environment, while aiming to foster job growth, allow greater access to markets, improve food security, and in an important gender-focused element of the program, to reduce harassment of women, especially female traders. We're also working to promote export diversification, where we are helping our clients to move away from dependence on minerals and commodities to broader-based, inclusive, export-driven growth. In Rwanda, for example, we've revitalized the tea sector, which was suffering from high costs and low yields. Now, to improve investment in Africa and to strengthen the overall business environment, our Africa Investment Climate Team has supported 45 reforms over the last few years. For example, small businesses across Burkina Faso have benefited from reforms under the country's Investment Climate Reform Program, which have dramatically improved the business registration process. Costs have been reduced by more than 50%, and the time to open a company fell from 134 days in 2004 to 13 days in 2013. These reforms have yielded about $8 million in private sector investments, the formalization of about 1,000 new businesses, and the establishment of about 2,400 new jobs within the past 3 years. We are also supporting the creation of companies by encouraging and jump-starting the entrepreneur of tomorrow. In Nigeria, we supported the You-Win business plan competition that attracted young entrepreneurs. About 1,200 business ideas in 6 key regions received financial support as well as training and mentoring to help those entrepreneurs effectively enter into the market. We now have a similar project in Guinea-Bissau. In addition, our multi-donor program, InfoDev, focusing on information technologies and startup firms in the tech sector, is fostering high-growth entrepreneurship in such areas as agribusiness supply chains, mobile technology innovation, and climate-related technologies. Now, despite the rapid growth in the number of formal sector jobs, the majority of young people in Africa are likely to work on family farms and household enterprises, often earning on only very low incomes. So on the other hand, there's the informal sector, which contributes to about 55% of sub-Saharan Africa GDP and 80% of the labor force. The rate of informal employment varies significantly from country to country, but about 70% of informal workers work in street vending. Now, this sector is facing an especially severe challenge in terms of low productivity and lack of skills. The informal sector is very heterogeneous, which requires nuanced and targeted interventions. Now, in the informal sector, the World Bank Group is tackling these issues through these targeted interventions. For example, in Togo, we're supporting informal entrepreneurs by providing targeted business training and specialized mentoring to give these entrepreneurs new opportunities. In Benin, new laws were introduced that simplified the legal regime specifically designed for small entrepreneurs to facilitate the formalization of informal businesses. So across Africa, in all these ways and more, we're trying hard to support the creation of employment opportunities, especially for young people. We're aiming high to deliver integrated and holistic solutions that are adapted to meet the specific local conditions of each country and each region. But I also know that there is tremendous amount of work left to be done. I am excited by the opportunities that we see as we aim to help our clients provide sustainable job growth and to provide jobs for Africa's young generation of workers, entrepreneurs, and job-creating industries. We are determined to help Africa overcome its democratic challenge and reap the full rewards of its potential demographic dividend. It is clear to me that generating employment opportunities for Africa's young people is the key to prosperity and stability, and vital to fulfilling the World Bank's twin goals. On behalf of the Global Practice on Trade and Competitiveness, I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and for the opportunity to interact with the young African leaders who we are privileged to have with us here today. So I wish you all a very successful conference, and I look forward to continue engaging with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Gonzalez. I think that very well set the stage for the scope of the challenge of youth employment and the focus of today, today's session, this session on entrepreneurship. So my name is Dion Filmer. I'm a lead economist in the research group of the World Bank. Until recently, I was with the Africa region's human development economics team. And as a part of that, we produced this book, of which I have the overview here, on youth employment in sub-Saharan Africa. We've left some copies of this by the registration. It's also available online, www.worldbank.org/Africa/Youth Employment Report, available for free download. But I think what's important about it is that it goes into depth on the issues that Ms. Gonzalez was talking about, the skills dimension, the job creation dimension, the entrepreneurship. And so what we've asked our panelists here to do today is, and as you noticed with the introductions, we have a very heterogeneous group with lots of differing backgrounds. And so we've asked them to come at this issue of entrepreneurship, youth employment in sub-Saharan Africa from their different perspectives and what they see as challenges, opportunities, and constraints to moving forward effectively. I'm going to say one or two additional things about each panelist, in addition to where they are today, to their current occupation, which was announced earlier. Mr. Zeballos is from the ILO office. He was formerly with the Inter-American Development Bank. He's been an advisor to the UK's Department for International Development. And he's been involved in a range of policy-making, strategic planning experiences in poverty reduction, labor markets, trade and competitiveness, and private sector and rural development. We also have Mr. Adeyemo, who is the co-founder and chief marketing officer of Oxosi, of which we'll hear more about, which is it's a social commerce application that allows members to discover new high-quality African fashion, art, and design products. He probably won't say it himself, but he was lauded by Applause Africa as one of the most influential brand managers in Pan-African consumer products industry. I should also say he is the chairperson for Kairos Africa, where he mentors budding African entrepreneurs on how to build sustainable and recognizable global brands. We also have Ms. Sabine Malik, who is a senior policy advisor at the Department of State, where her portfolio covers economic and innovation entrepreneurship issues. So we'll hear more about what that involves in a bit. We also have Mr. Aseko Alogo, who is a Yali Fellow. He is Deputy Secretary General and spokesman for the Association of Independent Action Youth in Gabon, and he's General Manager of Les Transports Citadins, his own enterprise. He co-founded the Young Gabonese Entrepreneurs Association, and he also set up the first Gabonese business incubator in partnership with the Gabonese government. And then last but not least, we have His Excellency Diarra, who is a newly appointed Minister of Youth and Citizenship Building in Mali. He graduated from the ENA of Bamako in law, and he is a lawyer in Mali as well. So without further ado, perhaps we can go in that order and hear your perspective on the topic of entrepreneurship and youth employment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for having the time to sit here and listen to this very interesting panel. It feels like home, actually. I was reading to the title, and it has two keywords that makes me feel like home here. It has the word youth and energy, and it has the word jobs, which is what I do. So I hope it's going to be interesting for you two guys this morning. Let me start with something that struck me in the morning in the previous session that was highlighted very much, which is about the importance of data. And the importance of data is because that gives us the perspective of the things that we are going to talk about. And that's what I would like to do first, to put the issue of youth unemployment and entrepreneurship into some sort of perspective by bringing some facts that we came recently with a survey at the ILO, a school to work survey that gave us a better understanding of what are the main issues that youth are facing to find a job in the region. And then I'll try to highlight some of the key issues that we at the ILO consider are the critical constraints that are not allowing the region to overcome this huge challenge. So all of you have read, of course, this very nice report of how many pages? 100 plus. And you will find a lot of data there. But there are a few things that you have to be aware of. Youth unemployment rates in Africa are not similar across the region, right? North African countries have a higher rate of youth unemployment, about 27%, and that's twice the rate of the global average, whereas sub-Saharan African countries have only 12% of youth unemployment rates, and that's the half of the other. Now let's put those things into perspective. It looks like it's not too much. If it is the average of the world, it shouldn't be too bad. But when we start to look at the data about those people that in the past year were searching for a job, that's what we call long-term unemployment, the figure jumps up to 45% of young people without a job. That's a lot. Moreover, if we look at the composition, we find that 7 in 10 young people in the region is self-employed. From those, 49% are own account workers, and about 20% plus do some work in their family, in their household. Only 3% employ other people. More, if we look at where these jobs are, 8 in 10 jobs are in the informal sector. So those are jobs that perhaps are not of good quality, right? Another element that you will be a little bit shocked, I was shocked with this, is something that we call the labor underutilization rate. So basically that shows us the number of people that is unemployed or people that is in irregular forms of work or is inactive. And when we look at that figure, it jumps up to 67%. And that is huge. Those are huge numbers. Now, what happens for those that did find a job, have a job that is paid, is wage? They have also an issue, because those jobs may be paid, but are paid at a very low rate. Those jobs are not protected because they do not have, for instance, access to annual leave or sick leave or maternity leave. They do not have proper social protection measures. And this is the worst part. Those jobs, for the majority, are temporary. The contracts are only for 1 year. So there's no security there. And moreover, those jobs have no firm contract. It's a verbal agreement between the employer and the employee. And those are the situation for those that have a job. So we are facing a big challenge here. You've heard in the morning, in the first session, the importance of education, the gap between those that are educated, those that have skills, and the jobs that they are performing. We found the same. There is a lot of people that are educated to perform the jobs that they are performing, and that has a huge impact, not only for them, but also for the firms, because productivity goes down. So we ask in that survey to the people, to the young people, what are the reasons why they cannot find a job? What is the problem? And about 28 to 29% of the respondents said that actually the problem is that there are no jobs available. We look for jobs, but we can't find them. Another big number of respondents told us that actually the requirements of those jobs are much more higher than their level of education or skills. So they don't feel prepared for fulfilling those jobs. And another number of respondents believe that they lack the work experience that is needed to do that job. So what happens when you cannot find a job that is paid? You become self-employed, right? Now, here is what connects us to the question of entrepreneurship, where I will go in a few minutes. And, but there are three things that I would like to highlight from what was said by Ms. Gonzalez. Yes, the region had a very good economic performance in the past decade, but it seems that that economic performance is not translating in jobs. It's not translated in benefits for the people. It's jobless growth, and that needs to be taken into consideration. The second element, there seems to be an issue in the private sector. We heard about the structure of the private sector. It's a private sector that seems to be not strong and not as dynamic enough as to produce the number of jobs and the quality of jobs that people and the young are expecting in that region. There seems to be that in the past decade, the investments, the foreign direct investments, were rather going to capital-intensive sectors rather than labor-intensive sectors. And of course, if that's the case, with that level of mismatch of qualifications and expectations, you have a gap that you cannot fulfill. There seems to be that there is an enabling environment that is undermining the good policy commitments to promote youth employment. There is a problem with labor market institutions and with youth employment information systems, and there is a lack of enough educational, vocational, professional training opportunities for the people. We also heard that there are opportunities, and we saw that business is flourishing in the past decade. We look at the data, and actually, yes, Africa is doing well in terms of a trend, but is well behind of the rest of the world. So if your opportunity is, because you are self-employed, is to become an entrepreneur, we ask if that is true to the young people. And here's what we got as a response. About 55% to 60% of the respondents have expressed that their expectation actually is to have a job in the public sector or to work for a firm that is already established. Only 35% of the respondents said that they would like to have their own business, to start their own business. So this is an important element because we try to believe that all these self-employed people are immediately going to become entrepreneurs. And that is not often the case. Entrepreneurship is not a status quo or is not the result of the absence of. It should be the decision that a person makes to do because he believes or she believes that have the qualities and the capacities to do so. So we need to be careful with those elements. Does this respond to the question that entrepreneurship is going to resolve all the unemployment problems in the region? Probably not. Not for all. But we must be clear about the importance of this aspect. Any strategy that will deal with youth unemployment needs to take into consideration the possibilities that entrepreneurship can bring to the table. Now, I will leave for the second part, the most important part of my message, which is, so what do we go about? How we can deal with this, and what is the experience of the ILO in order to deal with some of these constraints. But that is to put into perspective the issues that we are facing here. Thank you.
So next we turn to Mr. Adeyemo, and I understand we have a video that we're going to kick off. You might want to just say one or two words about the video to put it in context.
I want to say thank you to the World Bank Group, the Young African Society, for hosting such a dynamic event and giving us the platform to kind of share some of our experiences with this dynamic audience. So my name is Kalade Adeyemo, born and raised in Nigeria. I've been in the United States for over 15 years now. So I've been able to observe how quickly things have been transforming not only here around the world, but particularly in Africa and as it pertains to the young population that we are all so passionate about. But before I get into my journey, my entrepreneur journey, I would like to show a quick video that kind of highlights some of my experience working with some dynamic entrepreneurs around the world, but particularly the group that I've had the privilege to work with in Africa. So if you want to play the video, that would be great.
Crisis in education.
There's no question that we have a multitude of problems on this planet. I think we have the potential, not in centuries, but in the next 2 or 3 decades, the ability to really take on the world's big problems and solve them.
Now, some of the biggest and brightest innovations come from young people. Well, today we're going to introduce you to the Kairos Society. You're going to want to check this out because the people who are members of this are the CEOs of the future.
Student founded, actually, and the whole goal there is take on the big challenges in the world with entrepreneurs.
There's no place on earth where there's so many brilliant minds from around the world. Young people come together and they have so much of ideas.
The company was formed in Tel Aviv in Israel.
We started in Portugal.
I'm at Stanford. We're from Germany.
I'm from Shanghai, China.
There's never been a greater need or a better time to innovate. Innovation is the process by which we change the world. Innovation, to put it simply, is about making things better.
These students want to solve problems, and they're already solving problems in their own right. The question is, which problems will they solve, and what do you focus them on? How do you focus the next generation of entrepreneurs? That's what we do.
These are the guys who are going to find the next innovative solutions to some of these big problems, like clean tech, education, healthcare.
This is why some of the world's most influential leaders, individuals and corporations alike, are looking to Kairos Fellows for a fresh perspective on how to tackle the next generation of global problems.
The tremendous advances in science and technology offer unprecedented opportunities to make a difference, especially through engagement with young entrepreneurs and innovators, such as those at the Kairos Society.
Just check out some of the mentors of this group: Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Peter Diamandis of the X Prize Foundation, Duncan Niederauer. He's the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange.
Over the past 4 years, we've seen the growth of over 100 companies coming out of Kairos, taking on the big challenges like education, clean tech, healthcare, clean water.
Taking in $4.5 million in revenue in 30 days of being in production. Kairos really over the years has been the pivotal thing that's helped me get to this point.
In previous times, college entrepreneurship was confined to campus borders, and most entrepreneurs were confined to national borders. But Kairos transcends these boundaries, because in our interdependent world, there are no borders when it comes to the pressing issues we all face.
So what's really interesting about my experience with Kairos is we've had some really young, dynamic entrepreneurs from Africa. Currently, we have fellows from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Kenya, and they have found this unique platform to tap into that has access to amazing mentors, has access to models that they've seen work overseas that they're trying to replicate. There's this one unique group that I'm working with now called Appion, ampion.org, where they have this bus that tours sub-Saharan Africa. They're getting ready to launch their second tour this year, and the goal is to have entrepreneurs on this bus for a duration of days where they discuss some of the challenging problems in their region and come up with some really dynamic solutions to solve them. But one of the things that I really wanted to kind of underscore and shed light on is the role, because we talk about job creation and the role of Africa's fourth generation. And I think it's important to highlight it, at least from that level, because when you think about post-colonial Africa and its fourth generation, over the past few decades, each generation has had to play a specific role. The first generation had to fight and gain independence from the colonizers. The second generation, marked by greed and corruption, largely destroyed everything the first fought for. The third was tasked with cleaning up the mess made by the second. And so where does that leave us now, this fourth post-independence generation? And I think it is really up to this millennial generation to kind of build large-scale enterprises for the first time in post-colonial history. I don't think there's ever been a time that has given us the opportunity and the tools and the technology and the networks and the resources to be able to accomplish a feat of this caliber. And although there's a lot to be done still, in terms of cleaning up the mess that's been made, what we are seeing now is there's a decline in inter- and interstate conflict. Africa's fifth annual GDP growth is 4 times that of the EU. Between 2011 and 2015, African countries will account for 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world. In many African countries, the reliance on foreign aid has declined, and you're seeing more foreign direct investments in. And across the continent, at least from my lens, people are healthier, better educated, and more connected with each other and the rest of the world than ever. So this begs, again, to really look at, again, this post-colonial independence generation, to find ways to really capitalize on all the changes and the growth that's currently happening. And when you look at the amount of youth that are currently unemployed in sub-Saharan Africa, I think one of the questions that I constantly ask myself is, how do you enable them? How do you empower them? And how do you inspire them? And enabling them essentially requires giving them the right information, being able to guide and advise them and activate some of the ideas that they have. Essentially, complementing some of the conversation we had this morning is having the right mentors around them and having and giving them the tools to be able to freely express themselves. And when you think about enabling, enabling is also putting the right infrastructure in place. So for instance, it's cool for young entrepreneurs in the US to work out of their garages in San Fran or work out of their basement. But in Africa, I don't think you'll be taken seriously building a very large-scale business out of your basement. So what that tasks us to do is to create an environment where you could have these co-working spaces, these incubators. And there's several examples that I've seen in Nigeria. For instance, you have the Co-Creation Hub in Lagos. In Nairobi, you have the High Hub. In Accra, you have Hope City. In Joburg, you have Josie Hub. And in Cape Town, you have Silicon Cafe. But these are the kind of environments that enable young entrepreneurs and this younger generation to feel freely to tap into some of the resources that exist and be able to implement the ideas. And in terms of inspiration, I think it's also important to expose them to case studies of trailblazers locally and internationally that have actually done this. And you do that easily by integrating them into a very interesting platform like Kairos. You have some dynamic entrepreneurs in South Africa running the African Leadership Academy. They have a very dynamic network called the African Leadership Network. You have the Arambe Entrepreneur Alliance. So there's several of these entities and organizations that could be used as models to inspire young entrepreneurs. And lastly, to really, again, enable and empower them, we have to give them access to capital. So there needs to be some means for them to be able to grow these ideas to a point where they're not only fulfilling their passion, but they can actually employ and create jobs. And there's been very recent creations of ventures that are looking to tackle that. You have several accelerators and incubators across the continent. Very recently, ALN just created ALN Ventures, and I believe the deadline for that is next week, where they're looking for dynamic entrepreneurs to submit ideas and will be awarded monetary prizes to be able to grow and accelerate their business model. So from my experience being an entrepreneur, these are the changes in the paradigms, the paradigm shift that we're seeing. And when we're addressing the issue of youth unemployment and how we could tackle that very productively and effectively, entrepreneurship has to be integrated in that dialogue. And I think the kind of encouragement we would require from policymakers and head of states is to constantly nurture that community that's very dependent on technology, dependent on social media. They are very cognizant of what's happening around the world, and it's very difficult for them to comprehend why there's so much talent in a place like Africa, but yet unemployment is rapid. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as I was holding up the 1 minute warning, thank you for that. In a way, it's very inspirational. You know, you set out the importance of vision, and then you actually provided some very inspirational lines there. So next we have Ms. Malik from the U.S. State Department.
Hello, good morning, everybody. First and foremost, as you all know, we've had a very exciting week with sort of the Young African Leaders Initiative and sort of the Washington Fellows that are here. So as you all know, President Obama, as he stated again sort of at the beginning of the week, but more importantly, when he talks about Africa in particular, talks about the fact that, young people are really at the forefront of what we're talking about in terms of our engagement with Africa. And part of this comes to the idea that when we're talking about really some of the challenges that have been laid out by our colleagues both earlier at the beginning of the talk and also with my colleague here sitting here from the ILO, is that some of this is partly due to sort of, if you will, call the demographic bulge, right? The youth bulge in terms of just the amount of people that we're talking about. But the one statistic that always sort of, when I think about this issue, is always about the idea that we're looking at 10 to 12 million new workers will seek employment every year until at least 2025, right? That's huge by any standard. And this is not just a phenomenon where you're talking about the fact of, as my other colleague here spoke about, empowering a next generation of individuals to be able to be entrepreneurs, but there has to be some realistic conversation about what do we mean when we talk about employment, entrepreneurship, and the perception of young people. And I think in terms of his engagement, President Obama has been very clear, and also with the State Department and USAID, in terms of talking about looking at all these strategies and sort of our engagement, and also then looking at sort of the programmatic capacities and sort of filling out all these different strands that we're talking about. Some of these have to do with education and skills issues. Some of these have to do with really actually building, sort of, if you will, as my colleague talked about, sort of the entrepreneurship infrastructure that you need around people who are looking to build high growth and entrepreneurship systems. But then at the same time, we're also talking about a cohort of people who are not going to be able to be part of these conversations. And so what are we supposed to do with that as well? And we can't also sort of leave that aside as we talk about sort of entrepreneurship as being this really sort of high gloss, high glam sort of thing. I think we're talking about entrepreneurs in various different parts of the ecosystem. We're talking about, you know, women entrepreneurs who are talking about small, medium enterprise and small micro businesses. We're talking about young people who are actually looking to build probably what would be considered to be, even 10 years ago, you could say small, medium enterprise, and everyone would look at you and say, okay, we get that term. And now you sort of say that term and everyone looks at you with sort of a puzzled face. And then at the same time, sort of talking about, when we're talking about high growth sort of entrepreneurship and sort of the, not just the tech industry, but several industries that have that sort of growth, sort of what's going on. And I think a lot of times when we talk about at least what we've seen in terms of both with the fellows that have come through various different State Department programs, but also in terms of USAID engagement, is that there needs to be some coherence between, I think, some of these conversations, and that's what we're lacking at the moment, I think, in terms of talking about that. There is sort of, if you will, entrepreneurship in the very sort of sense that you're talking about new ventures and new venture growth, and what does that actually mean? And then you're talking about folks that are sort of involved in what you would consider to be entrepreneurial activity, but those two are not necessarily in the same vein. And I'd like to explore that more with my colleagues as we talk about that, because another program that's going on with the State Department that has been, you know, sort of, if you will, a little bit of a success story has been this AWEP program, which is sort of looking at women entrepreneurs. And we've had 184 alumni, and they focus mostly on small, medium enterprise. But again, it's focused on women, and mostly young women. And when they talk about some of the industries that they're interested in, they're talking about industries like textile, cosmetics, and things of that nature, which they're also very possible potentials in terms of what that market would look like. But we need to explore that more, both with our African colleagues, but also talking about sort of within government. How are they also looking at some of these individuals who want to engage in activities and in industries that are historically not considered to be your entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial activities with regards to when we talk about startup culture, but still very much at the forefront of when we're talking about where potentially some of the growth can happen. So I think that's a nexus that I'd like to explore and we talk about more. And as we're seeing through State Department programs and USAID's things, these conversations are very ripe. And so we're very much looking forward to engaging further with the Washington Fellows, and also sort of looking at what we can do when we talk about the next generation of Africans from the USG perspective, and really excited to be able to be here and be part of this energy that's here in this week, and also with the Africa Heads of State Summit coming up, really to engage on some of these issues. So thank you.
Thanks, Amin. Just to complement what you said, there's an initiative that the bank is very involved in called the Adolescent Girls Initiative, which is very similar to what you were describing. And I would encourage you to Google it. There's some very rigorous evidence on sort of its effectiveness at getting young women into the kinds of entrepreneurial activities you were describing. It's really self-employment, but getting that self-employment to be a lot more productive. And there's some great examples from Uganda, from Liberia, but I would encourage you to take a look. So next we have Mr. Aseko Alogo from Gabon, who is one of these fellows that Sabine was talking about, who will provide some comments. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. And I would like to say that I am a living example that how being an employed can lead to becoming an entrepreneur. And I usually call myself an accidental entrepreneur. It's because when I came back as a Gabonese fellow from Germany as an IT engineer, I didn't know that the majors from Gabon because we're bringing top management over because they assume that young people, degrees older, weren't experienced enough. They assumed that we had lack of experience and we had a problem with practical job knowledge. But I took the initiative. So I decided to do something else. And I think this is my point. This is what is very, very important for us, young African, because we have to be the change we want to see. And I think that I started my whole story, my whole process by working for a legal company, doing something very, very different. Because as you know, Dean, as you can know, like, if they work on the legal department, they're not supposed to take care of business people and investors. So I was doing this operation job, like do the car rental reservation, taking care of the accommodation and so on. And at a certain point, after I was doing this for a couple months, I found out like I can make a lot of money with this because this is not what they're supposed to do in the first place. And they just hired me for a couple months. So I decided I was able to build a trusted relationship with different kind of partners, hotels, restaurants, car rental companies, and logistics company. So they knew me, and everybody went well. So at the end of the day, I said, okay, thank you, mister, and I think I will decide to start my own, I will start my own company. And now came all the struggles. And when we talk about struggle and challenges, for me, I see it as an opportunity to do something, to show them, because to do something, because this is, at the end of the day, this is what you call an entrepreneur. This is my definition personally as an entrepreneur. You have to be a doer to be an entrepreneur. If you're an employee, that will lead you to an entrepreneurship. You have to take initiative, and then everything's gonna be right. And I find a way to beat the system. I will tell you later how I did. I beat the system, and I started with 5 cars. And I was taking care of the car reservation, what I was doing for the legal department. And I still remember when the general manager of the company told me, come on, Will, you're an IT engineer, and you will rent car. I was like, okay, find me a job. And then he was like, okay, how will you do? I told him, but you'll be renting cars for 6 months. I've been waiting for you. So you will be my first customers. I will sign a contract with you. He said, okay. And then I started working for him, and then I built my network and so on and so on. So I didn't, and I was struggling. At a certain moment, I thought I was alone. But I started to talk with different young Gabonese entrepreneurs. We all went through the same struggles. Like at the beginning, lack of funding, lack of experience, and so on, SME mismanagement, because what I knew is the IT system, 100110. That's it. And now you come and talk about businesses. I didn't know. I knew what it takes to rent a car, what the cost, what's the cost, that's it. And so I started this. I've been doing this for 4 years right now, and I'm doing okay. So, once we found out, like with all these young people, that we had the same struggle, we're going to the same problems, we decided to create the first Young Gabonese Entrepreneurs Association without asking the government what they can do for us. We showed them what we can do for them. Because one of the problems you have, right now, I'm 29 years old. In Africa, they still stay you young when you're 40. That's true, right? Am I right or wrong? I mean, you know better. So, and then they tell you that you're still young when you're 40. So I was able to create a company and work with and give 10 jobs to people. I signed partnership with ministers. This is also a way. This was a way for me to handle the challenge you can face when you're trying to hire African young people. Because they want to, if you try to hire a degree holder, he might tell you that he want the kind of money, and then when you listen to this, you just find out like the money you want to have is the double that the business owner is getting. And then you're like, okay, thank you, and maybe next time. So we were going through the same struggle, and we start to do surveys in the environment. We started to talk with young people. And at the end of the day, the Gabonese government initiated the Youth National Forum to ask everybody, the youth, the Gabonese youth, like, what's your problem? What do you want? And then we say, we, business people, young business people, we want a business incubator. The first time I heard the word incubator was in terms of with babies, like with babies. This is what I knew, like babies. And then a friend of mine, like, it was like, do you know what a business incubator? I say, yeah. I didn't know, I just Googled. And I was like, okay, I know what it is. And now we have to find out how to build this in Gabon. And then I still remember it was on February 2013. We met our president, Mr. Ali Bongo, and then he said, like, what do you want? So we present our project. He said, you guys, what is the business incubator? We said the business incubator is this. We say, okay, how many of you got companies? And this was the question. This was the good question. Because if you want to talk about entrepreneurship, you have to be, once again, the change you want to see. That's it. And we requested something because we didn't want to be what we call in French, apprenti sorcier. I don't know how to say it in English. And maybe Dion will explain later. And we requested a local expert, an international expert to help us. And he accepted, and then we signed a partnership. And you know, I don't want to pick on the former minister from Liberia or the minister of Mali, but you know how back us, the administration is doing, is very, very slow. So we were waiting. On January 2014, this year, we were sitting in front of the president of the African Development Bank. He was talking with big SMEs, just like that. So we were sitting like maybe on the back. They were talking about billion investment. And we were like, okay, this is our country also. We can't change it. I mean, I love Cameroon, I love Côte d'Ivoire, but I'm from Gabon. So those people was talking about a lot about billion, and I raised my hand and I asked him, like, in Gabon there is majors, but think about young people. He said, okay. So I didn't know, like, there were a team of tax manager. So we went to them with my team, and then we started talking with them. They told us about what they call technical assistance fund, and it's like a gift the African Development Bank is giving to some of the countries. So we work on the process, and we were able to fundraise over $1 million at the African Bank of Development to set up the partnership. And thank you very much. And our minister of the economy didn't know about it, but we were stuck at the moment, because as an association, you can't get the money directly. You have to go to the minister. And we met him, like, and then we start talking with him, and then he was like, really? We said, yeah. Okay. So he wrote the letter to the president, approval. We signed the contract, the partnership with he signed the partnership with the African Development Bank at the New York Forum Africa in Libreville in May 2014 in front of the president. And we were just proud. Once again, we took the initiative to do this. And my job is, because I'm very, very passionate about motivating young people to turn the Sportly energy into project, because what I didn't know, I'm a former national basketball player. And I think, what do they do? What do we do when we're young? Because there is so many things we can do. We in the States, there is so many things we can see we don't have back home. So we should start thinking about something. We should start something, and something that's work. Because when something is not working, you know it. And I want to leave you with this, like, you have to beat your fear. Some of you will not believe me, but I come from a French-speaking country, as you can maybe understand from my accent. I've been educated in German. I'm fluent in German. But I've been the first time in an English-speaking country last September for 3 weeks. That was in a state. The second time right now, and I never talk in English in front of so many people. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that great story. I take two things. One is we all know where we're going to rent our cars next time we go to Gabon. And two, no, thank you for that reality check. I think that was important. And you really are. You threw me at the end there with the basketball. I thought, what more could he do? So before we open it up for questions, I wanted to ask the minister, who is going to give us some closing remarks in a little bit, if he had anything to add, perhaps in relation to next week's events. I mean, we know that next week a priority theme will be youth and young people, but I wondered whether you had any advanced insights on how you're going to engage that topic next week.
Thank you. I will apologize for my poor quality of English. I'm not as fluent as Mr. Aseko. I'm coming from a French-speaking country, and I will just make an introduction in English, and then I will maybe be more comfortable in French. I would like to thank the World Bank and the Young African Society for giving us the opportunity for being here and share our point of view about youth issue, because youth issue is not only consist of youth entrepreneurship and employment. It's a big challenge for our countries, and we are concerned, and we know that the future of Africa will be necessarily be held by our youth. And for that, we have to take care about youth, and youth have to understand that politicians have youth in the middle and in the center of all of politics. So don't feel like youth only can find the solution to youth problem. I think it's like a game. You have a $100 US ticket. You have one half, and the government have the other half. So we have to have a kind of synergy so that the political and civil society can work together and to make the policy successful. And for America and Africa Summit, for sure, because they will, because I will not be part of this meeting. It's a meeting between head of state. They will talk about youth, because they will talk about the future of the continent. And you cannot talk about the future without talking about youth. And the focus will be on the security issue. But youth is part of this issue too. We cannot have any kind of stabilization in any part of the world without giving the opportunity to the people to feel or to be in a kind of wellness. And in Africa, young people are living in very, very difficult conditions. So for the solution of any problem in the continent, we'll need to take care about youth. This is, with my poor English quality, the kind of introduction I could share with you, and I will come back with my closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, and there's certainly no need to apologize. I think that was very clear what you were getting across. I'm being told that we have 15 minutes left, so I thought maybe if we could see if there are any questions in the room, any burning questions. Please try to keep it short and keep it in the form of a question. We're probably going to have to limit to one round, so please nobody else stand up at this point. And keep your questions to literally 20 seconds if you can. Direct them to somebody, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you. So maybe we'll start there and then alternate between the two mics.
Thank you for your presentation. My name's Elise Webb, and I'm with the Initiative for Global Development. And we have a network of CEOs that we've been working with who have said that they are creating these jobs, but the skills and the entrepreneurship, they're not finding as much in the talent pool that they have to draw from in Africa. And I was just wondering what you guys thought would be best as to how you could integrate the great entrepreneurial things that you guys are describing, but within the private sector to help change it from within. You guys said earlier that the firms were much smaller in Africa, so how can we use the entrepreneurial spirit to grow those firms as well as start new ones?
Hello, my name is Ndeye Traoré. I'm from Paris and Senegal. So like you did, I was struggling with my English. So I was a former flight attendant, so I have been also volunteer for a French NGO named Aviation Sans Frontières, which take care of children, mostly from developing countries, suffering from heart disease. So I used to bring them from developing countries, mostly in West Africa, to France to receive surgery because of lack of different problem of infrastructure in Africa. And what bring me to this volunteering job is the fact that one of my aunt employee, she ran a tailor firm, just lost his son because of problem of energy shortage in Senegal. So they haven't been able to send the fax on time in Switzerland. So they get like difficulties to receive the information in Switzerland. So I have been able to be on time in Senegal to get the baby, to bring him in Switzerland to receive the surgery on time. So he died like 5 days before they received the information. So my question is related to your activities about like in the private sector. How do you face energy shortage and infrastructure problem in Africa? For example, in Gabon and other country, when you rent your car, you rent the car, etc., and you lose like your wheels because you travel all over the country on really bad road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello. My name is John Manirakiza from Burundi. I'm with the Burundian diaspora in the US. I also deal with farming with immigrants. I just want to address this to the minister first. In Mali, consider that the 2014 report from Africa Progress panel talks about Africa importing 35 billion in food, and there is something like 15 billion illegal fishing by some of the major countries. You got something like 50 billion industries there. What are you doing in terms of having young people adopt agriculture, fishing, and those things in terms of employment? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Issa, and I'm from Mali. I'm very pleased that His Excellency Mr. Jara, our youth minister is among us. I just want to deliver a contribution. So we young people from Africa, we need to forget about one sector, which is an emerging sector. This is agriculture. And nowadays, it is said that Chinese own 1/3 of our land, which is need to be verified, but this is scary. And it is an emerging sector. You guys, you are the top on the scale. Your health can be voiced, can be heard. So, and then back in 2003, in Maputo Summit, African Union, our leaders, they promised and declared they would invest 10% of our national budget in agriculture sector. Till now, 2014, only 5 countries are doing so. How come? How come you can ask somebody to go to school, he doesn't know what to eat? How come somebody graduated from high school, his parents are retired, they don't know what to eat? You need to quit school. You gotta do something in the informal sector to help families. It's an important and emergent sector. That's what I would like to deliver, agriculture. So we need to focus on that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair to say that you should definitely take a look at that report I mentioned, where we highlight that exact issue about the importance of agriculture as a sector of opportunity and what needs to happen to ensure that that can be a pathway for youth, because a lot of jobs will be in agriculture. There's just no two ways about it. And how can those jobs be more productive? So, yes.
Yeah, good morning today. I am Dr. Jinka Fitzgerald. I'm half Cameroonian, half Nigerian, but I reside in Cameroon. And so I know what goes on between the two countries and generally in Africa. Yeah, I would thank Kolade and Aseko for the inspirational stories. And I would say in Africa, Ghana is an example. It's an inspirational story. It's a success story. And sometimes we have to look at countries like Ghana to follow the example to get where we want to go. African governments, I would say politics and corruption and greed has come into the way of development. So we have to look at that. We have to curb that first. Your influence, the World Bank Group and the other organizations, you have to be dealing with the governments especially. I'll give an example of myself. I'm a doctor by profession, but I'm an entrepreneur in my head. And I have so many wild dreams, wild ideas. When I try to pursue them, the governments, they crush you down. You can't go forward. You bring up an idea. I try to do exportation and agriculture, but the French companies, they're sitting on you. You can't do anything. You go to capital, you try to get authorizations, and you can't be given that because somebody else is has blocked the way. What I'm trying to say is, sometimes these governments this is a fight you can't take in from inside. You will need organizations like you to fight that fight for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask the remaining 3 to be very brief. Sorry, we need to move on.
I'm Saidat from Nigeria. I'm a businesswoman, a feed manufacturer. I own a factory. Well, in my country, Nigeria, we are the largest population. They have introduced entrepreneurship into their curriculum. But I want the World Bank to work on the methods that this entrepreneurial education are being disseminated to them, because we don't feel the impact as in maybe it's just on theoretical base. So we want you to work on that in your next report. How many jobs of this entrepreneur, how many in this curriculum can, as in feeling the impact in the sector? Then also, to my other fellow from Nigeria, the innovators. We have a gap between the innovators and the private sector. Some of the innovators, they have these ideas, but who are those people taking this thing up? Who are those people commercializing it? It will just die with them. So there is a need to bridge the link between the innovators and the private sector. Thank you.
My name is Legine Kumilinga, a fellow from Tanzania. And this, you forgive me if I won't get the answer, the names correct. I would like to direct the question to Korade and Willie, because you mentioned incubator as one of the ideal solution to deal to support the small business. But I've been studying a couple of incubators. Most of them they're being supported by academic institution or government or some of NGO. But my question is, how can we make this incubator profitable so that they can run financially sustainably without depending on any donors? I would like to understand what ideal business model you would suggest.
Thank you. And this is going to be the last one. I'm sorry. You stepped up late. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We really are running out of time. I have people showing me cards over here, so this will have to be the last one.
My name is Rita Omobode. I'm a Yale Fellow from Nigeria. I'm a marketing communications practitioner and founder of Street Project Foundation. I believe that young people can make a sustainable living by doing the things that they have an innate ability to do. In Africa, a lot of young people are unaware of their opportunities and do not live in communities that enable them become who they want to be. And I believe that this is the first step to addressing unemployment in Africa. What are your views about talent discovery, training, and mentorship, and its effect on youth employment challenges in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was actually a very interesting, broad range of questions. In terms of time management, we have a hard deadline at 1:30. We have to vacate the room. So what I'm going to suggest, and we do have some closing remarks, I'm going to suggest turning it to the 4 panelists here. And really, if you want to pick up on maybe one or combine 2 questions, and really just maybe in 1 minute or less, just, or if you want to ignore the questions and say one more thing that you didn't get to say in your first round. So please, we'll go in the same order and just pick up generally from all these questions. Thank you.
Yes, great questions, hard to respond all of them, so I'm going to pick 2. About the skills mismatch that was referred, I would like just to suggest one element there that's based on our practice and experience. It can't be possible to find what are the right skills for the right jobs that employers are looking if we do not involve the employers in the conversation of what is it needed. We need to involve them more. We need more engagement of the private sector in the decision making about what is needed in terms of a skill. In terms of how to deal with, how to break this situation in which you have a great idea and you think you can be a business and do good money with that, from there to really become an entrepreneur and to really become a business. The things that these guys have done very well. There's no recipe, but there are a few things that we learned that could help. If you support business in the earliest stage, at the startup moment, we believe that there is a greater chance that those businesses will succeed and will continue. The things that were mentioned here. When you have an idea, then the next question is, so what do I do next? How do I establish the business? How do I register the firm? How do I put taxes here or there? There are few elements that are not rocket science, are there, but not often are known. So training programs that focus on the startups are, in my view, a critical element to enable this jump from one great idea to a real business. Thank you.
Well, there were a lot of questions, and I think the one that I'm in a position to address, there was one around how to make incubators profitable and sustainable, and the other young lady talked about bridging the gap between the private sector and innovators. From my experience, what I've seen with this accelerator/incubator model is they have a very rigorous process of accepting entrepreneurs in the first place. I think it's a great thing to have, to be passionate and have amazing ideas, but the point we underscored here is ideas that are scalable, that could create jobs. So these entrepreneurs are encouraged, are urged to think about really scalable businesses. And typically what I've seen is these accelerators, these incubator programs, once they've accepted these entrepreneurs, and the notion is they would assist them in growing these businesses, so scalable business that really affects the bottom line. So you tend to have accelerators take a percentage of the company. They help formalize how to go about raising capital through the different fundraising stage. And that's the model that I've seen that's worked. There's several versions of that around the world in different parts of the world, and several versions emerging in Africa right now. From a talent discovery angle, I think what was echoed earlier about education and skill development and the lack of skill. I think a trend that we're seeing now is Africa is experiencing a brain gain, not a brain drain. I would say there are a lot of diasporas, expats going back, and they're starting different local versions of multinational companies. You have McKinsey & Co. Very recently, that was started in Nigeria. You have versions of multinational companies like IBM going in Kenya and creating in tech hubs. So I think the talent is there, and I think the opportunity to discover them is there. I think people just have to be previewed to the platforms and the resources to be able to explore that. From my experience, while we were working on this startup that we're getting ready to launch, and we had to identify all the retail experts and gatekeepers that existed in South Africa, in East Africa, and parts of West Africa like Ghana and Nigeria. We utilized our network. We utilized several of these networks that are similar to the African Leadership Network, to the Arambe. We called out families and friends, and you'd be surprised that majority of these people have either gained that experience overseas by schooling abroad, or they're familiar with somebody that has the pedigree that you're looking for. So although, again, there needs to be a lot of improvement in empowering this population with 21st century skills, I would say that that talent does exist on the continent. And it's our job to share those resources to make it more visible and more apparent.
Well, thank you again for great questions. Just in terms of the energy piece, I mean, I do want to put a plug in for Power Africa. It's an approach that we're sort of taking in terms of realizing that really energy needs are critical to talk about, growth in Africa. The second thing I wanted to sort of highlight was, and this comes up in several themes, but I think there is a lot of linkage here, is this idea between the linkages between who ultimately are and how do you commercialize some of the activity that's going on. And that requires a really good and a strong, robust sort of identification from start of your sort of intellectual property all the way to the end, and who owns that chain. And that requires a lot of several factors and ingredients, but most importantly, it's really strong rule of law. People have to understand that, some of the technology that's being created and some of the stuff that people want to own ultimately in terms of intellectual property really require sort of that robust ability to be able to also protect it as well. And that's out there as well. And that's one of the reasons why you see this difficulty between the private sector being able to take and commercialize and take some of those risks in some of these markets. And I think that if we sort of focus on that area, you're going to be able to see sort of a growth there in terms of looking at some of these innovation systems.
So thank you so much for great questions. So I will try to pick and to give an answer to everybody. I will start with the private sector question related to skills. First of all, what the Gabonese government has done is that they create a policy and say that companies with more than 50 employees will have to start programs on to grow skills with young people. This is what I do personally is, like, as I mentioned earlier, I signed partnership with different kind of university in Gabon to work with young people so that I can teach them how to run their own business. And with my employees, I will just give one example. Like, I redefined the definition of a driver. They still call, in French, a driver is chauffeur. So I will explain. So as they're still calling themselves chauffeur, but I explained that they're more than just a driver in English, because my idea is that a driver will take you from one point to another one. The chauffeur will open the door, will take your car, will say, thank you, sir. Do you want something, sir? Thank you very much. He will close the door. He will not start the radio without asking. He will start the radio if you ask. That is a chauffeur. A driver will pick up the phone, will do whatever. So this is what I do for themselves. Like they feel like, okay, I'm more than a simple driver. And they also do defensive driving program. They also do, because this is what you have to do when you're working with when you work with oil company, for example. You have to do them so they feel better. So the question in terms of the infrastructure, to my sister from Senegal, I don't take risk. First of all, the first thing I change, I do not rent cars without the driver, because it is very, very risky. So I have the driver, so if somebody need a car, it's always with a chauffeur. And if the road, if the infrastructure, if they're going to rural zone, they will always go with 4x4 and not with small cars. This is how I reduce the risk. And in terms of agriculture, my brother, yes, that's true. Start one tomorrow. This is good. Take the initiative once again. So in terms of incubator, as I mentioned earlier, is that we're not expert, or that we heard of it. So we ask to work with investment fund. Actually, in the amount, they put a fund in it. So so that we have a backup to the incubator, but I will be more than happy to talk about it with my brother so that we can get help. Because as President Obama says on Monday, if we all work together, we will leave a strong Africa behind us. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks for doing a great job of covering the range of questions. So I'm going to turn it now to Excellency Diarra to provide some closing comments to the session. Thank you.
Before that, I think there was two main questions addressed to me in relation with agriculture. Okay, but I think there was another one there. With your permission, may I? Or
sure.
did
I'm getting very nasty looks from over here. I'm getting very negative looks.
Okay, so let's go for my. Okay, let's talk about Mali. Mali has a predominantly young population. Young people are evaluated around 60 to 70% of the population, youth being the range between 15 to 35 years, according to national definition. For Malian government, youth remain our greatest asset. We have comprehensive approach of youth employment and underemployment issue. Youth employment issue must fit within the definition of an overall macroeconomic framework conducive to private investment, even if it's true that our ranking in doing business has a little bit decreased in 2014 due to our crisis. Incentives are put in place not only to facilitate the creation of private company, but also to encourage and support young entrepreneurship. Several programs are put in place, such as the strategic framework for poverty reduction, national policy of labor employment, vocational training, youth employment program, in French, PEJ, a 10-year program for the development of vocational training for employment, which is a major program, and the support program to Malian youth, PAGM, and so on. As part of the implementation of the PEJ, we have established a national fund for youth employment supplied from the youth employment tax on revenue of gold as we have the third African producer of gold, of course. And the Youth Employment Program 2011 to 2016, with a provisional budget of 38 billion of CFA, places particular emphasis on the development of youth entrepreneurship, including for vulnerable groups, gender, facilitating the access of youth in rural areas to the labor market. We have several structures such as INPE, National Agency for Employment, APEJ, Youth Employment Agency, the FAFPA, Support Fund for Professional Training to promote youth access to employment, and the FAR, Revolving Fund for Employment. All of them participate at different levels in the framework of a policy aimed at facilitating the creation and funding of a professional activity for young promoters or improve their employability for job seekers. For achieving this challenge, we have the support of World Bank, which contributes significantly to improve business climate, but also to the establishment of rule of transparency and good governance, without which there is no growth and no improvement of youth employability. In this regard, we would like to thank the World Bank for the signature this month of the Skill Development and Youth Employment Project agreement to support education and training for employability and private sector, lead job opportunity for youth in Mali within a total budget of 63 million of US dollars. Because we believe in that Africa will be made by African, we believe in African youth potential. But unfortunately, the African social and institutional contexts are not always in favor of its development and its full participation in the process of social change. The barriers are numerous, such as the paternalistic perception of youth, as said here, which is always declined in the perspective youth is the future, but never as a current and certain force on which Africa can count, that create a psychological barrier which negatively impacts on its contribution as an actor of social transformation. Illiteracy, which is a reality, affects a large part of the population, mainly the youth. In addition, the weak quality and the mismatch between the academic programs and the need of employment market, unemployment and low access to income with the corollary delinquency, prostitution, migration, disease, drugs addiction, alcoholism, and more recently, extremism and terrorism. The weakness and absence of a civic conscience. All canvas citizenship training gradually are disappearing, leaving young to themselves without reference, without this feeling to belong to a national community in a context of globalization. The absence of reference model that can inspire its revolution, in particular in a world of competition where only the merit should be the reference. The gender balance, young girls are often maintained far from school and from decision area, although they represent the largest part of the population and have a strong contribution to the family maintenance. The rush from rural area to cities, although the future is in agriculture, as said here, agribusiness represents today a huge opportunity for youth employment as much as the use of technology, the new technologies of information and communication. These are the reasons why it's essential for us to have a strategy to promote a young leadership in Africa by promoting young, deserving people who have ambition for themselves, for their country, and for their continent. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think one thing that emerges is it's very clear there's no silver bullet here. Entrepreneurship by itself is not the answer. The morning session, education by itself is not the answer. There's a whole collection of things that have to come together to help make progress. One great line, and I'm going to use this in the future from the minister's closing remarks is Africa's youth aren't just the future, they are the present. And we should keep that in mind. They are the productivity of the present. They are the innovation of the present. And I think that is a great insight that I think we can all take from today. So with that, let me thank, I hope you join me in thanking the panelists for their insights. And we will receive some instructions now about what happens next.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please have another huge round of applause for our panel? And once again, a special thank you to His Excellency Mamadou Diarra. So thank you very much. As we move on, and in closing, I think we have one last quick speaker that we'd like to have you hear from. One thing that most of you guys would agree, when it comes to entrepreneurship, most people have the question of funding, right? How am I going to find the funds? And the gentleman that I'm going to introduce, I believe can give you a bit of an insight, not only from his expertise and background with the World Bank, but also his professional background. So with that, I would like to please invite up Mr. Mamadou Touré, who is the president of Africa 2.0. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, Mr. Mamadou Touré.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's always, difficult to do a speech just before lunch. There's an adage in France that say, ventre affamé n'a point d'oreille, which means an empty stomach doesn't have ears. So let me at least try to share with you, in the next few minutes, a bit of who I am, what we do, and why I'm here. So I am indeed the founder and chairman of an organization called Africa 2.0. And Africa 2.0 is basically a community of hundreds of emerging leaders from across the continent that gathered 4 years ago to work together and setting up an agenda for Africa. And it came at a time where we realized that without a vision and without a long-term plan, this generation might lose this opportunity of setting up a critical mass that can effectively and sustainably impact change in Africa. So in 4 years of time, we're now present in 27 countries. We have 500 plus emerging leaders from almost every nationality in Africa. We've worked out, we started an initiative called Startup Africa, I think 15 months ago, and over 15 months we've reached out to 8,000 entrepreneurs in Africa, mentored 1,000, and provided technical assistance and access to funding to 100 of them. We also have set up a mentorship program that basically tried to address the question of intergenerational dialogue, where in a country we'll select the top 50 leaders in a country that would mentor 4 people in their 40s, which gives you 200, that mentor 4 people in their 30s, 800, who mentor 4 people who are young professionals, 3,200, I still can count, who mentor 4 people in university, 12,000, who then mentor 4 people in high school. So in a program like that, you gather two and a half generations who actually share knowledge and try and impact as a collective. Why did I start Africa 2.0? We have, great members here. We have Shelvin Longmire, who is the chair of the DC chapter. I was talking to Kelly earlier, who's a co-chair of the DC chapter and also on the board of Young African Society, which I congratulate for this great event. We didn't do that at my time in the World Bank not so long ago, so well done on putting this together and creating this African consciousness. Now, when I was at the World Bank, I was with IFC, so I was investment officer coming from Paris, investment banking, and moving to Africa and joining the World Bank with the idea of wanting to change the world. And it was very interesting as I was traveling across the continent. I was meeting a lot of young people like you. You know, we have one here who's actually a member of 2.0 on stage, our friend from Gabon. And, you know, in the 40-plus countries I've visited over my career, I was coming across young, talented, bright Africans who had nothing to envy to anyone in the world in terms of intelligence, dynamism, etc. But they all had one same problem. They were pushing a plane on their own, right? In the sense that despite all their inner skills, capacities, one key thing was common to them that prevented their expansion and their growth, and it was the environment. Right, so as you know, we indeed, you know, we're having good conversations with a World Bank colleague about macroeconomic policies and engaging with ministers. I realized that one thing about the World Bank was a very top-down approach. And what actually was very needed was a bottom-up approach, right? So, and then I decided, okay, what if we put all those young leaders under one platform to get them together and around that plane that is a bit tough to you know, to start, which is the, let's call that plane Africa Airlines, right? And we get them to all push at the same time, at the signal in one direction, that plane will take off, right? And 2.0 was aimed at setting up that platform where all those young leaders would create that critical mass and that energetic force to actually drive and push change in Africa. So I've been told that I don't have much time, so let me try and fast track. Basically, 4 years down the road, we now have chapters around the world, and we've managed to create a collective. So, you know, a critical mass without an agenda doesn't mean much. So what we decided is, you know, in addition to all the plans and reforms and discussions that were taking place, this generation needed to set its own agenda. And then we gathered in South Africa and in Mombasa 18 months later and decided that, you know, China has an agenda for Africa, America has one, Europe has one. What's Africa's agenda for itself? And how do we involve the diaspora? How do we leverage on these fantastic skills, capacity, funds, knowledge that the diaspora has to create one common platform that will take the continent to the next level? So we said we need a plan, we need an agenda, and we produced this document, which is the Africa 2.0 Manifesto. And this manifesto basically was done over 18 months by 500 young leaders working online from 60 countries, designing the Africa of tomorrow and committing to execute and make this Africa of tomorrow happen over the next 20 years. So we have a critical mass, we have a direction, we have energy, and then we engage. I want to make a comment to, you know, I was listening to all those conversations about youth employment. We tend to forget one thing. In youth employment, you have employment. And employment is a macro issue, right? So when you want to actually create employment, you need to have the right incentives and the right ecosystems for first employment to take off, and then have the youth to benefit from that. And inclusive growth is one key thing that we don't hear enough, right? Which means if you say there has been, you know, 7 or 10% growth for 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies are from Africa, then if it was resource related, then we need to put linkages programs, right? So that local content can actually enable to those entrepreneurs to benefit from those things. So, you know, as we engage with this, that's why we think the manifesto has proposed a systemic approach to growth, right? And now we've engaged with a lot of young leaders from YALI. Many of them are our members, and what we really want to do is to work closer with young African society, with YALI, you know, and with the diaspora. You know, to be part of Africa 2.0, you need to be of African descent. And as we leverage on all those skills and all those capacities, we think we can take Africa to the next level. I'll leave you with one last metaphor, because now I have exactly 8 seconds, so let me see if I can kill the metaphor in 8 seconds. Okay, you only study? Okay, thank you. I'll go for yours. So, I don't know how much you watch soccer, football. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I'm not so sure in the US how much it's popular, but I'm sure with, at least with the World Cup in Brazil, you've seen. So the winner of the World Cup in 2010 was Spain. The winner of the World Cup in 2014 was Germany. Those two teams have one thing in common, right? 20 years ago, which is now, yes, indeed, Spain realized they had the second best championship in the world. They never won the World Cup. A bit like Africa. We have everything, but we're still struggling, not only at the World Cup. Right? So what they decided to do, they went across the country, they took 200 kids between 11 and 14, and they decided that they would groom those kids over the next 10 years, make them become best friends, teach them one way of playing football, and grow them as a family. But by the age they were, they told them, you, this generation, will play for Spain, and you will become world champion. 14 years later, this is what exactly happened. Now, look at Germany. What happened was, after 2004, which basically Germany's team at the Euro did a very, very bad score, which is, Germans and failure, they deal painfully with it. So what Klinsmann actually did after that, where Germany was in crisis for their football, said, it's because we haven't nurtured our young generation enough. So what the whole technical team of Germany did, they put priority to young Germans in their best clubs. And they started grooming that generation that you've seen at that last World Cup. 2004, 2014, 10 years later, world champion. No super mega star, but a team. 2.0 has that same agenda. If you're part of it, join us.